So after talking about the cardiovascular system, I will be moving to the endocrine system. So tissues and organs of the vertebrate body operate to maintain homeostasis of the body's internal environment and control other body functions such as reproduction. So in all, it's all about maintenance of homeostasis. So if you remember from the previous lecture, let's say for example in the respiratory system. So in the respiratory system, when the body cells are doing its metabolic activity, the level of carbon dioxide increases. So which is kind of a deviation from the homeostatic condition. Now, in order to get rid of that excess of CO2 and bring back the normal homeostatic condition, the body uses the respiratory system. The lungs and the other organs are being utilized, or they come into action to remove the excess of CO2 and bring up new oxygen. Similarly, in the cardiovascular system or the circulatory system also, the homeostasis is being maintained by providing the gases or replenishing the used oxygen by the fresh oxygen, or providing the nutrients which are deficient at different tissue sites. So in a way, you can imagine that most of the systems in the body, they are working towards maintenance of homeostatic condition of the body. Now this homeostasis is not achieved alone by a single system. This is achieved through the action of many regulatory mechanisms that involve almost all the organs of the body. There are two systems which are exclusively devoted to the regulation of the body organs. The first one is the nervous system, and the second one is the endocrine system. So both these nervous systems and the endocrine system, they regulate the body, or they control the function of the body organs via release of some regulatory molecules. These regulatory molecules, they bind to specific proteins which are present onto the specific target cells that compose the different kind of organs. So in a way, let's say if the body wants to move, then the signal needs to be sent by the nervous system so that the legs, they could be brought into action. Or if the food needs to be digested, then the nervous system again needs to come into action to release some digestive enzyme. Now these movement or release of digestive enzyme is coordinated by release of some regulatory molecules. So we see further what these different kind of regulatory molecules are. So the axons of neurons, they secrete chemical messengers. These are called neurotransmitters. They're usually released in a synaptic cleft. So this synaptic cleft is an area where the two neurons meet. A hormone is a regulatory chemical that is secreted into the blood by the endocrine gland, or it could be any other organ of the body that is exhibiting a endocrine gland function. So there are a couple of organs which are specifically having the endocrine function, and there are other organs also which, along with the endocrine function, they have their other functions also. Now, once this hormone is released, it is carried by the blood to every cell in the body. It is going around the body as the blood is moving around the body. However, it is only the target cells that could respond to that particular hormone. The target cells, they have the availability of specific receptors that could recognize or that could read the message sent via those hormones. The chemicals that the neuron secrete is sometimes called as a neurohormone. So we can have another thing which is called the paracrine. So these are the chemical regulatory molecules that are released and act within an organs. So these chemicals, they are not transported via the circulatory system or via the blood to other target sites. They are released by the organ itself and they function on the organ itself. Another chemical messenger is the pheromone. So these pheromones, they aid in the communication between animals. You might have seen that ants, they usually move in a single file, just following each other. So this is because the ants, they keep on releasing pheromones, and the other ants, they follow that smell of that particular pheromone and they move in single file following one another. So these pheromones, they are means of communication, but they do not regulate anything within the animal. So within those organisms, the function of other systems, let's say the circulatory system or the digestive system, is not manipulated by pheromones. It's only the communication between two animals or two organisms. So the function of organs are influenced by neural, paracrine, as well as the endocrine regulators. Now these all three different kind of chemical stimulators or the chemical regulators, they bind to a specific receptor, to a specific protein receptor, which is present on the surface or within the cells of the target organ. So let's say this pictorial representation here. So here what we see is that this is a neuron where the axon is secreting some kind of neurotransmitter. Now this neurotransmitter is binding to the target. So the target cell is the same for, let's say, all the three chemical messengers. So now this neurotransmitter binds to a specific receptor. Another one, the endocrine gland is secreting a hormone. So this hormone is secreting into the blood vessel, takes up this particular hormone and reaches to the target cell. Although the target cell is the same, the receptor changes. You can see here that the structure of this particular receptor is quite different from what is in the first case where the neurotransmitter is binding. Similarly, there are paracrine regulators. So they are secreted by the organ itself and their target is completely different. So in a single cell, it could be target of 3-4 different chemical regulators. However, it will function in a different manner upon binding of a different chemical regulator. So the endocrine system includes all of the organs that function as exclusively as endocrine glands, such as the thyroid gland, the pituitary gland, adrenal gland, and it also includes organs that secrete hormone in addition to other functions. Let's say, for example, thymus, pancreas, parathyroids. So these glands, they lack ducts. These endocrine glands, they don't have fine network of blood vessels or ducts which are connected to them. They just secrete their hormone or their chemical regulators into the surrounding blood capillaries. Now these blood capillaries, they pick up these hormones and transport to different sites. If we talk about the exocrine glands, they have ducts and they secrete their product into the duct itself. And then it can be carried away. So let's have a look at some of the chemical stimulators or some of the hormones. So the pituitary, the posterior lobe of pituitary secretes antidiuretic hormone. In short, we call it ADH. The target tissue is kidney. So it stimulates the reabsorption of water. or it conserves water. So let's imagine on a dry day when you are, let's say, one is traveling and the intake of water is less. So in that condition, more antidiuretic hormone will be secreted so that stimulation of water is, reabsorption of water is stimulated, which will lead to the conservation of water and less urine will be formed. Another hormone which is secreted at the posterior lobe is the oxytocin. So the target cell is uterus and the mammary glands. So when it acts on uterus, it stimulates contraction, and when on mammary gland, it stimulates milk rejection. So both of these hormones, they are peptides and they are 9 amino acids now. There's another part of the pituitary which is the anterior lobe. This anterior lobe stimulates a wide variety of hormones. The first one is the growth hormone. So it targets many organs. So it stimulates growth by promoting protein synthesis and fat breakdown. So this particular growth hormone is also a protein. Then is the adrenocorticotropic hormone. So this is having the target as the adrenal cortex. It stimulates secretion of adrenal cortical hormones such as cortisol, and this is also a peptide of 39 amino acids. Another one is the thyroid stimulating hormone. In short, it's called TSH. It stimulates the thyroid. It, the target is thyroid gland and stimulates thyroxine secretion. This is a glycoprotein. Another hormone is the luteinizing hormone. In short, it is called LH. So the target tissue is the gonads. So it stimulates ovulation and the corpus luteum formation in females. It stimulates secretion of testosterone in males. So in male and female, this luteinizing hormone has different function. This is also a glycoprotein. So another one in the which is secreted by the anterior lobe is the prolactin. So target cell is mammary glands and it stimulates milk production. And this is also a protein chemically. So the next one is the melanocyte stimulating hormone. So the target tissue is the skin. It stimulates color change in reptiles and amphibians, and the function is unknown in mammals. So this is a peptide and it has two forms, it is 13 and 22 amino acids. The next gland is the thyroid gland. So this thyroid gland secretes two hormones. Number one is the thyroxine, and this is the target. Most of these organs or tissues, they are the target of thyroxine. So this thyroxine stimulates metabolic rate essential to normal growth and development. And chemically, this is a hydrogenated amino acid. Another hormone which is secreted by thyroid is calcitonin. Now this calcitonin target is the bones. So it lowers the blood calcium level by inhibiting loss of calcium from the bones. And this is also a peptide which is 32 amino acids. Next gland is the parathyroid gland, and this secretes parathyroid hormone. Its target is bone, kidneys, and the digestive tract. So this raises blood calcium level by stimulating bone breakdown. So this is kind of opposite of the function of calcitonin. Also, it stimulates calcium reabsorption in kidneys and activates vitamin D. So in a way, this is stimulating the absorption of calcium from the food or from the blood. And this is a peptide of 34 amino acids. So another gland is the adrenal medulla. This secretes epinephrine, which is also called adrenal and norepinephrine. the male. So the target is smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and blood vessels. So the major actions which are under the control of this hormones is it initiates stress response. It raises the heart rate, blood pressure, metabolic rate, and dilate blood vessels. It mobilizes fat and raises blood glucose level. So whenever there is an urgent requirement of doing something, let's say somebody is indulging in a heated argument or maybe in a fight, then these kind of hormones are very effective. So immediately one would realize that if he is having a heated argument, his blood pressure is high, the voice level is high, and this is because of the activity of epinephrine and norepinephrine. So the chemical nature is these are amino acid derivatives. Another gland is the adrenal cortex. So the hormones which are secreted are the aldosterone and the cortisol. So the aldosterone, kidney tubules as the target, which helps the maintenance of sodium and potassium balance. This is a steroid. Cortisol, it acts on many organs. Adaptation to long-term stress and raises blood glucose level, and also it mobilizes fat. This is chemically a steroid. So pancreas also secretes two hormones, which is insulin and glucagon. So insulin acts on liver, skeletal muscles, and the adipose tissue. So it helps to lower the blood glucose level and stimulates storage of glycogen in liver. Now, this is a peptide of 51 amino acids. Now the glucagon also acts on liver and adipose tissue. Now it has an opposite function of what insulin is doing. It raises the blood glucose level and stimulates the breakdown of glycogen in liver. And this is a 29 amino acid peptide. Another gland is ovary, which is secreting estradiol and progesterone. So in estradiol has many functions. It has general functions and also on the female reproductive structures. So generally it stimulates development of secondary sex characteristics in female, and also it stimulates growth of sex organs at puberty and monthly preparation of uterus for pregnancy. This is also a steroid. Progesterone, its target are uterus as well as the mammary glands. So this prepares for the pregnancy and also stimulates the development. This is also a steroid. Another gland in the males is testes. This secretes testosterone and it has many targets, and as well as it targets the male reproductive structures. So in body stimulates development of secondary sex characteristic in males and growth spurt at puberty. So this is kind of a similar kind of function in males as progesterone is doing in the females. Also it stimulates development of sex organs and it stimulates spermatogenesis. And this is also a steroid. There's another gland which is called the pineal gland. This pineal gland secretes melatonin. So the target is the gonads and the pigment cells. So the function of this melatonin is not well understood. However, it is believed that in some vertebrates it influences the pigments and may control biorhythm in some animals. And it may also influence onset of puberty in humans. And this is also a amino acid derivative. So hormones secreted by the endocrine glands belongs to 4 different chemical categories. So these are polypeptides, glycoproteins, amines, and the steroids. So polypeptides, these are the hormones that are composed of chains of amino acids shorter than 100 amino acids. For example, insulin and ATH. Glycoproteins, these are polypeptides which are significantly longer than 100 amino acids, as well as it has a carbohydrate moiety. For example, follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormones. The third category is the amines. So they are usually derived from the amino acids tyrosine and tryptophan. They include hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla, thyroid, and the pineal glands. Fourth one is the steroids. So these hormones are lipid derived from cholesterol and include the hormones testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, and cortisol. Steroid hormones, they can be subdivided into sex steroids and corticosteroids. So sex steroids, they are secreted by testes, ovaries, placenta, and adrenal cortex. And adrenal cortex secretes corticosteroids. They are secreted only by the adrenal cortex. So cortisol is one of the example which is secreted by the adrenal cortex, which regulates glucose balance. So the amine hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla, they are also known as catecholamines. So these includes epinephrine and norepinephrine. So these hormones may also be categorized as lipophilic or hydrophilic. So lipophilic means those hormones which are soluble in fat, and hydrophilic which are water soluble. So the lipophilic hormones include steroid hormones and the thyroxine, and remaining other, they are hormones which are water soluble. The endocrine system interact and cooperates with the nervous system to regulate the activity of other organs of the system. It is quite possible that some nervous secretions, they're trying to, let's say, increase the heartbeat. So some hormones may also play a synergistic role and may also lead to increase in the heart rate or in general blood pressure. The secretory activity of many endocrine glands is controlled by the nervous system. So among such glands are adrenal medulla, posterior pituitary, and the pineal glands. So the hypothalamus controls the hormonal secretion of the anterior pituitary, which in turn regulates the other endocrine glands. So ultimately, it is the hypothalamus which is controlling the pituitary, anterior part of the pituitary, and anterior pituitary is regulating the secretion of hormones from the other endocrine glands. So on the other hand, the secretion of a number of hormones is largely independent of neural control. For example, the release of insulin in pancreas. So it will depend upon the availability of glucose in the blood. Let's say, for example, if there is high level of glucose in the blood, so in that particular instance, there will be increased secretion of insulin. So that will help to absorb or reduce the level of glucose. On the contrary, if there is low level of glucose in blood, so at that particular instance, there will be low secretion of insulin. So that will help in the maintenance of optimum amount of glucose. So less glucose will be absorbed and it will be remaining in the blood. Paracrine regulation. So there are cytokines that regulate different cells of the immune system. And there are growth factors that promote growth and cell division in specific organs. So there are specific examples like the platelet-derived growth factors, epidermal growth factors, and the insulin-like growth factors that stimulate cell division and proliferation of their target cell. Now, there are other regulatory molecules also, which are nerve growth factors. So these belong to the family of paracrine regulators of the nervous system called the neutrophils. Another one is the nitric oxide. So they function as neurotransmitter and is produced by the endothelium of blood vessel. So it diffuses to the smooth muscle of the layer of blood vessel and promotes vasodilation. Now this vasodilation is required when more blood flow is needed. The endothelium of blood vessel also produce other paracrine regulators which are called endothelium. This stimulates vasoconstriction. So it has an opposite role of what is of nitric oxide. So let's say there are instances where less blood flow is required. So in that instances, endothelium is secreted which constrict the blood vessels and less blood is flowing through the vessels. Another one is bradykinin. This promotes vasodilation. So this function is almost similar to what is the nitric oxide. So this paracrine regulation supplements the regulation of blood vessel by the autonomic clocks. So another category is the prostaglandins. So this is a 20 carbon bound fatty acid that contains 5-member carbon ring. Now this is derived from a molecule which is called the arachidonic acid. It is released from phospholipids in cell membrane under hormonal or other stimulation. So these prostaglandins, they are produced in almost every organ and it has wide variety of roles. So let's see what are the different roles. For example, in immune system, prostaglandin promote inflammation. So it leads to increase in the pain and fever. So let's say, for example, if there is some what we call accident, or let's say some sharp object touches hand or any other body part. So at that particular point, we see that there is cut or maybe just inflammation. So that swelling or that inflammation is being regulated by the prostaglandins. So now there are drugs which are called as the prostaglandin inhibitors. So if those drugs are taken, then one would realize that in place of having swelling at the accident spot, the swelling is not there. In the reproductive system, prostaglandins play a pivotal role in ovulation. So excessive prostaglandin production may be involved in premature labor, endometriosis or dysmenorrhea. That is usually experience of painful menstrual cramps. In digestive system, these prostaglandins, they may inhibit gastric secretion, and it also inhibit the influence intestinal motility and fluid absorption. So in instances where excess prostaglandin secretion is there, person may experience condition of indigestion. In the respiratory system, these cause constriction, whereas others, some prostaglandins, I mean, there's a wide variety of prostaglandins as well. So some may cause constriction, some may cause dilation of blood vessels. So it depends what is the condition. In the circulatory systems, they are needed for the proper function of blood platelets. So usually when there is requirement of damaged blood vessel repair, let's say the process of blood clotting, so there prostaglandins come into action. Urinary system, prostaglandins produced in the renal medulla cause vasodilation. So that results in the increased renal blood flow and increased formation of urine. So let's say in a winter day or in a rainy day, if somebody takes excess of water, then this prostaglandins leads to the increase in the formation of urea and the body gets rid of the excess water. So one of the most popular drug is the aspirin, which is called as the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, NSAIDs. It's a class of drug that includes endomethacin and ibuprofen. So these drugs produce effect because they specifically inhibit the enzyme cyclooxygenase 2, which is called as COX2. It is needed to produce prostaglandins from arachidonic acid. So this arachidonic acid is not being converted to prostaglandin when this COX2 is being inhibited. So this NSAID inhibits the inflammation and associated pain. So that's the reason that in cases of inflammation and pain, most of the time doctors recommend taking aspirin. However, there are problems with this aspirin or this NSAIDs. So they usually, it's not only that they inhibit COX2, they also inhibit COX1. So this COX1 helps maintain the wall of the digestive tract. So it means that if somebody is taking excess of aspirin, indigestion will be there. Also, it can lead to gastric bleeding and increase in the blood clotting time. So usually in those people where there is problem with the blood clotting or blood is thin, low level of hemoglobin, in those people it's not recommended to prescribe aspirin. Okay, so there are hormones that enter the cells, we call as the lipophilic hormones. So all of these steroid hormones and thyroxines, they are lipophilic regulatory molecules. The other molecules which are water soluble molecules, they cannot pass through the cell membranes. So let's see one of the example here. So So this is one of the example here. So let's say this is one steroid hormone which is being released by the endocrine gland into the blood. Now this is attached to a protein carrier, moves into the blood vessel. So when it reaches the target site, it can easily be taken up by the cell. It can cross the plasma membrane, being lipophilic in nature. So now it has two fates. Either it could bind to a specific protein receptor which is present in the cytoplasm, or it could enter the nucleus and there it could bind to a specific protein receptor. So in both the cases, when it is bind to the specific protein, now it can get access to the nucleus, the DNA, the transcription machinery, and it will lead to the formation of messenger RNA. Now this messenger RNA will move out to the cytoplasm and will lead to the process of translation. And the desired protein or the desired effect will be produced. So let's say one of the examples here. So this is thyroxine, which is having 4 molecules of iodine. In short, we call it T4. So this T4 is transferred into the blood to the target site. Now this T4 can be taken up by the target cells. So when taken up, this T4, one of the iodine removes and it leads to the formation of T3, which is triiodothyronine. Now this T3 moves inside the nucleus. Now here it binds to the receptor protein, and along with the binding, now it gets access to the transcription machinery of the cell. It leads to the formation of messenger RNA. Now this messenger RNA, now it can regulate the metabolic activity of the cell via the usual process of translation and production of the desired protein. So there are other hormones also which are not able to cross the cell membrane, which are water soluble. So we'll talk about that particular thing later. So probably this is what I wanted to talk to you in this particular lecture. So thank you very much for your attention.